Hello everyone, Namaste. Guff Gaff को yet another episodeमा सबैजनालाई स्वागत छ। आज हामीसँग हुनुहुन्छ हाम्रो एकदमै नजिकको प्यारो मान्छे। By profession he is a doctor. उहाँ चाहिँ primary care physician हुनुहुन्छ and he specializes in family medicine. Today we have Dr. Ronin Dahal. Ronin, welcome to Guff Gaff.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
अनि के छ त लाइफमा के भइरहेछ?
के हुनु, busy too, but I'm having fun. We're doing a lot of things and I'm really excited to be here and talk about, I think, एकदम important topic हो यो, हैन? And I'm excited.
अनि अब हामी त चिन्छौँ रनिनलाई एकदम मजाले हैन? हाम्रो अडियन्सको लागि एउटा छोटो इन्ट्रो दिउँ न त आफ्नो बारेमा.
Yeah, so ma Ronin Dahal. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. I went to school at Texas Tech University. Ani त्यहाँबाट I went to Trinity School of Medicine in St. Vincent. अनि त्यहाँबाट एक वर्ष जति बाल्टिमोरमा बसेँ अनि त्यसपछि मेरो मेडिकल स्कुलको सबै रोटेसन गर्नलाई म जोर्जियामा बसेँ अनि त्यसपछि रेजिडेन्सी गरिरहेको छु अहिले यहाँ कन्कर्डमा एट्रियम हेल्थ कभेरसमा and my goal is to go do a sports medicine fellowship. So I will be board certified in family medicine and sports medicine. That's the goal.
Yeah. अनि अर्को कुरा अब रनिन चाहिँ हाम्रो यहाँ शार्लोटमा नेपाली सोशल क्लब भन्ने छ सोशल क्लबको को फाउन्डर पनि हुनुहुन्छ ब्रिफ अबाउट सोशल क्लब भन्ने
सोशल क्लब हामीलाई almost out of necessity create गरेको कुरा हो अब बिहिबारमा यहाँ सर्दाखेरि एक्चुअली हामीले कसैलाई पनि चिनेको थिएनौँ हैन अनि we were like there seems to be a lot of young people in the city and they're just not a great way to get everyone together so हामीले डिसाइड गरेको अब अनुजा समीक्षा विशाखा बिहिबार म मिलेर we were like let's start this thing हैन we started with 10 people and now we have over 200 members and
200 भइसक्यो
210 भइसक्यो त्यो हेर्दै के
त्यही त हो
and we do hikes and events I really love what it's turned into हैन अब हेल्थको कुरा गरेर बेलामा one of the important pillars of having a good healthy lifestyle is having a good community हैन so I think we're doing a really good job with that and I want to do more with the whole Charlotte community and not just like younger community.
आजको हाम्रो टपिक चाहिँ हेल्दी लिभिङ स्टाइल हो अनि आज चाहिँ हामी यसो क्याजुअल गफ गफ गर्नेछौँ हाउ टु बी हेल्दी अनि हाउ टु इट हेल्दी त्यसकै बारेमा यसो गफ गफ गर्नेछौँ सो अब स्टार्ट गरिहालौँ है अनि रनिन व्हाट डज इटिङ हेल्दी मिन्स
Yeah, that's such a big loaded question. I feel like like we tell patients like just eat healthier. I know that's a really hard question to when you go home and you open your fridge you say okay Ki, what's healthy? I know. I think generally healthy eating means eating a whole food, plant-based diet. I know low in saturated fat, low in fried foods, and healthy eating. I think kind of is incorporated with a healthy lifestyle and healthy eating it's about kind of changing your whole lifestyle so generally I would say eating more fiber, eating more plants, cutting down sugars that's the biggest culprit I think we're very aware sugar is going to be a big topic cutting down sugar, cutting down processed food and eating basically grocery store you shop on the outside of the grocery store and not on the inside of the grocery store because that's where all the bad food is.
Oh wow.
All the good food is on the outside on the periphery of the grocery store. So I think generally speaking that's kind of what healthy eating would be.
Okay, so हामीले हाम्रो फ्रिज ओपन गर्दाखेरि त हैन देख्ने भनेको त सबै लाइक सबैको त नभनौँ हैन तर जेनरली लाइक मोस्ट पिपलको फ्रिजमा चाहिँ अनहेल्दी फुड बढी हुन्छ हैन अब हाउ टु मिनिमाइज दैट क्या त्यो
अब that's a tough thing हैन किनभने अब आज हजुरले यो पडकास्ट सुनेर घर गएर ल म फ्रिज सब एम्प्टी गरेर मेरो सब कुरा फालिदिन्छु भन्न पनि मिल्दैन किनभने मिल्छ एक्चुअली फालिदिउँ हैन सबै कुरा फालिदिउँ तर भोलि गएर के हुन्छ भने you're going to rebound हैन and you're going to go back to those unhealthy habits so I think सानो चेन्जबाट सुरु गर्नुपर्छ हैन जे कुरा पनि चेन्ज गर्दाखेरि ड्रास्टिकली चेन्ज गर्न थाल्यो भने that's when you hit that plateau and त्यसपछि you revert back to your old ways so okay let's start हजुरको फ्रिज खोल्यो भने के भेट्छु मैले
मेरो फ्रिज खोल्यो भने बियर मासु whole milk, बच्चाहरूको stuff like muffins and all sugary stuff, होइन? Frozen sectionमा fries, chicken nuggets, frozen foods, होइन? त्यस्तै हो. या अब भेजिटेबलहरू पनि हुन्छ हुन चाहिँ, होइन? हाम्रो लाइक नेपाली भेजिटेबल्सहरू पनि हुन्छ.
Yeah. I think हाम्रो community-मा that's one of the biggest things that actually helps us is हाम्रो diet actually त्यति unhealthy पनि छैन के. Like नेपाली diet हेर्ने हो भए veggies खान्छौँ होइन almost every day. अब दाल भात तरकारी नै भन्यो भने पनि that's not a bad meal. होइन dal is really good for you, veggies are really good for you, and rice is fine. You know, you should be eating rice. होइन the stuff that gets you in trouble is like the beer, obviously, and the sugary drinks. Fridge myself, and the biggest culprit I would say is juice. I know we see juice as like harmless, but it's not really harmless because it has a lot of sugar, especially bazaarlai, and I mean not just bazaarlai. Juice is generally filled with sugar. I know, and I think as a theme sugar is the culprit. Sugar is the bad guy. So just trying to cut out sugar in every way. I know reading the nutrition facts हेर्नुपर्छ होइन. It takes a little bit of effort. पहिले चाहिँ it's kind of a foreign thing, nutrition facts हेरेर खानालाई, तर after a couple of months second nature जस्तै हुन्छ कि टक्क हेर्ने. Saturated fat should be the first thing you look at. Then you look at your total carbohydrates. होइन total carbohydrates भने carbohydrate is sugar. होइन you eating rice is you eating a spoonful of chili के अरे चिनी. You eating rice is you eating a spoonful of chini. किनभने rice खाएपछि पेटमा गएपछि there's no difference between rice and table sugar because it's all glucose, you know, ultimately. So rice is not a bad thing, but rice in moderation is key. हैन अब हाम्रो प्लेटमा हेर्यो भने हैन दाल भात तरकारीको प्लेट हेर्यो भने यत्रो माउन्टेन हुन्छ हैन. भातको on the साइडमा अलिकति दाल हुन्छ, अलिकति तरकारी हुन्छ, अलिकति मासु हुन्छ हैन. So it's not about necessarily even changing the way you eat or the things you eat. It's about changing the portions and the proportions of what you eat, you know. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So अघि कन्सिस्टेन्सीको कुरा भयो होइन. अब राइट अवे हामीले चेन्ज गर्न सक्दैन. हामीले अब ल हेल्दी लाइफस्टाइल गर्ने भन्यो होइन. वी इट स्यालेड फर a week. This was we get back to old habits.
Yeah.
So अनि सबैजनाको अब न्यू इयर रेजोल्युसन सबैको इट हेल्दी, बी हेल्दी होइन, एक्सर्साइज भन्ने होला होइन. अनि विच अब स्टडी सोज त्यो ब्रेक चाहिँ कहिले हुन्छ 2 विक्समा ब्रेक हुन्छ अरे क्या. 2 विक्समा हुन्छ कन्सिस्टेन्ट हुन्छ, त्यसपछि ब्रेक हुन्छ अरे होइन. त्यो कन्सिस्टेन्सी मेन्टेन चाहिँ कसरी गर्ने त हामीले अब?
त्यही हो. I think sweeping drastic changes जुन January 1st मा हुन्छ होइन, that's what gets into trouble होइन. Don't just switch to eating salad होइन. आज हामी मासु भात खाने मान्छेले है नेक्स्ट विक गएर स्यालेड मात्रै खान थालेपछि you're going to go back होइन. That's just unnatural for अब एउटा ह्याबिट भएको बेलामा it's unnatural to just completely quit cold turkey होइन. That's never the best way to quit. You always have to gradually taper होइन. So instead of throwing all your rice away and going to salad, I know, why don't you start with a salad before you eat your meal? I know, and there's multiple benefits to this. I know, so take some cucumbers, take some onions, take some lettuce. I know, throw it all together and put a little bit of dressing on it. I know, simple dressing. Ani ठ्याक्क खानु भन्दा पहिला you eat the salad. I know. Saladमा अब टन्नै फाइबर हुन्छ होइन. अब if you add the cucumbers, there's a lot of water content. अलिकति bulk form भयो होइन पेटमा गएर. And if you do that 5 minutes before you start eating, पेटमा already गएर केही बसिरहेछ होइन. So imagine like एउटा पाइप छ है ड्रेन पाइपमा होइन, सिधै पानी हाल्यो भने त all of a sudden all that water drains होइन. But if you give it some fiber and you give it some bulk, then that water is going to take longer to flow down the drain. And that's essentially how I see eating fiber before your meal. किनभने अब you eat a salad before your meal, all that food takes a longer time to get through your system, to get through your पेटबाट जानु पर्यो, इन्टेस्टाइनमा जानु पर्यो होइन. It kind of slows that down. Gastric emptying भन्छ होइन त्यसलाई. Gastric emptying slow भयो भने जिउले जुन त्यो सुगरहरू लिइरहेको हुन्छ खानेकुराबाट, it takes it in a slower rate होइन. So त्यसो भएपछि हजुरको त्यो जुन सुगर खाएपछि यस्तो स्पाइक हुन्छ नि, ब्लड ग्लुकोज जुन स्पाइक हुन्छ, that spike gets tamed a little bit होइन. So essentially कुरा गर्दा गर्दै let's talk about insulin and its role होइन. हजुरले जे कार्बोहाइड्रेट पनि खायो भने सुगर हो होइन सो जिउमा जान्छ एउटा सुगरको स्वाट स्पाइक हुन्छ माथि होइन द हायर योर स्पाइक इज द हायर अमाउन्ट अफ इन्सुलिन योर पेन्क्रियास रिलिसेस इन्सुलिन भने के हो इन्सुलिन भने जिउमा जुन ग्लुकोज जान्छ त्यो ग्लुकोज भने एनर्जी हो इसेन्सियली होइन त्यो एनर्जी हजुरको जिउभरिको सबै सेल्समा छिर्नु पर्यो होइन इन्सुलिन इज द की द्याट ओपन्स द लक टु योर सेल्स इन्सुलिन रेजिस्टेन्स भनेको चाहिँ के हो भने जिउमा धेरै फ्याट छ होइन ओर जस्ट क्रोनिक हाई सुगर लेभल्स जिउमा छ भने चाहिँ के हुन्छ भने द्याट की गेट्स अ लिटल रस्टी होइन त्यो की रस्टी भयो भने चाहिँ जिउमा बढी सुगर एक्युमुलेट हुन्छ होइन एन्ड सुगर इज भेरी टक्सिक है सुगर चाहिँ धेरैवटा इफेक्ट हुन्छ जिउमा जुन अक्सिडेसन भन्छ होइन अक्सिडेसन रियाक्सन हुन्छ जिउमा त्यसले चाहिँ हजुरको ब्लड भेसलहरूलाई अट्याक गर्छ होइन स्टमकको लाइनिङ एभ्रिथिङ इसेन्सियली इज डिस्ट्रोइड बाई सुगर सो द्याट्स वाइ डायबिटिज इज सच अ डेन्जरस डिजिज होइन जिउमा धेरै हाई ब्लड सुगर लेभल भएपछि जिउको सबै प्रोसेसेसहरू आर्टरिजहरू सबै एट्याक गर्छ होइन सो द्याट्स वाइ द की इज टु स्टप द लेभल्स अफ सुगर फ्रम बिङ सो हाई इन आवर बडी एन्ड स्टप द्याट इन्सुलिन रेजिस्टेन्स होइन एन्ड अब कुरा त कहाँबाट कहाँ सक्यो होइन but essentially what you're doing with your meals is sugar ko jun spike huncha crazy spikes we're trying to control those spikes so that you have less insulin हैन के हुन्छ भने अब every time हजुरले खाँदाखेरि हैन you say you eat 100 grams of sugar every time त्यो spike यत्रो यहाँ माथिसम्म spike पुग्यो हैन you need equal proportion of insulin to control that sugar हैन टन्नै insulin आउनु पर्यो कि you have to move that sugar into your cells because it can't be in your floating around होइन so repeatedly insulin दिएको छ होइन your body gets resistant because it's used to getting so much होइन if that makes sense होइन so we are trying to control those huge spikes of insulin all the time अर्को habit के हुन्छ भने we're constantly snacking होइन हामी खायौँ होइन 1 घण्टापछि you get hungry and then you eat again you cause another insulin spike होइन दिनभरि हाम्रो स्पाइक नै भइरहन्छ कि इन्सुलिन लेभल जहिले पनि हाई नै हुन्छ so we want to try to control those होइन and even if you are snacking do a protein snack do a snack with protein and fat so किनभने प्रोटिन र फ्याट खाँदाखेरि चाहिँ त्यो जुन स्पाइक हुन्छ सुगरको त्यो स्पाइक हुँदैन होइन so you have less insulin being pumped into your body all the time so that's another healthy change to make
so protein and fat goes snacking like for example like
so you could do peanut butter and carrots I know you could do apple and peanut butter you could do handful of nuts I know you could do yogurt protein हो carbs पनि हुन्छ तर you're getting kind of all those things yeah those are some of the simpler snacks fruits पनि actually fruits technically हुन चाहिँ कार्बोहाइड्रेट हो तर फाइबर हुन्छ सो कार्बोहाइड्रेट इसेन्सियली फाइबरले चाहिँ ब्यालेन्स आउट गर्छ अब हजुरको केही खानेकुरामा 8 ग्राम कार्बोहाइड्रेट छ र 7 ग्राम चाहिँ डायटरी फाइबर हो भने इसेन्सियली ओन्ली 1 ग्राम मात्रै कार्बोहाइड्रेट काउन्ट गर्नु पाइन्छ कि किनभने फाइबरले चाहिँ बेसिकली नेगेट गर्छ जुन कार्बोहाइड्रेट छ फाइबर पनि टेक्निकली एक्चुअली कार्बोहाइड्रेट नै हो सो काइन्ड अफ ब्यालेन्सिङ दोज थिङ्स आउट होइन cutting out snacking and actually त्यही कुरामा हामीले जुन खाना खाएपछि स्पेसली टन्नै भात खाएपछि 1 घण्टापछि एकदम फेरि भोक लाग्न थाल्छ नि there's a reason for that as well रोलर कोस्टर जस्तै हो होइन त्यो मैले जुन स्पाइक भने you're just sitting here होइन यो कन्स्टेन्ट लेभलमा छ अनि यस्तरी स्पाइक भएर एकदमै धेरै सुगर होइन what goes up must come down so if you're up here you're going to come down here base यहाँ थियो होइन यहाँ स्टेडी इन्सुलिन छ के अरे सुगर छ यहाँ माथि पुग्यो but when you come down you go under होइन सुगर चाहिँ you get hypoglycemic होइन सुगर जुन बेस लाइन लेभल छ त्योभन्दा पनि कम भएपछि चाहिँ हामीलाई बडीले चाहिँ oh my gosh we don't have enough energy you need to eat भनेर त्यो फिलिङ आउँछ कि लो सुगर हुन्छ इसेन्सियली सो जति हाई स्पाइक भयो त्यति भोक लाग्छ एन्डमा सो द्याट्स वाइ टन्न भात खाएपछि यु फिल काइन्ड अफ लेथार्जिक अनि त्यसपछि पछि गएर भोक लाग्छ नि द्याट्स द रिजन
ओके सो अब हामी जेनरल प्र्याक्टिसमा भनौँ न खाना खान्छौँ अब क्यान यु टेल इन सच अ वे द्याट पिपल विल अन्डरस्ट्यान्ड लाइक यु नो ओके यो खाना खान लागिरहेको छु अब भात खान लागिरहेको छु होइन हाम्रो अर्डर चाहिँ कस्तो हुनु पर्यो त अघि भने जस्तै स्यालेड सुरुमा
Yeah.
अनि त्यसपछि भात दाल त्यसपछि what can we do throughout the day?
So yes, I think getting fiber before getting the rest of your meal is a good idea. होइन अलिकति पेटमा bulk form भयो भने it helps you eat less and it helps with the gastric emptying होइन त जुन खानेकुरा how fast हजुरको खानेकुरा goes through your stomach and your intestines. So I think eating fiber first is key. And I think for me personally, pani pani, I think you do a glass of water before your meal. होइन that helps with portion control. किनभने पेटमा अलिकति bulk already भएपछि you're gonna eat a little bit less. होइन and so essentially drink a glass of water first, eat some fiber. होइन every meal you should attempt to get some sort of fiber. होइन whether it's a salad, whether it's cucumbers, carrots, जे भयो भने पनि you should always add fiber to your diet. Because actually another component is हाम्रो डायटमा enough fiber छैन. And that's another reason हाम्रो धेरै chronic disease हुने भने चाहिँ हाम्रो fiber छँदै छैन किनभने because of all the processed food we eat. So get your fiber in. Ideal situation would be होइन fiber पछि you eat your proteins and fats and then you eat your carbohydrates last. तर अब मासु भात छ भने म मासु पहिला खान्छु अनि भात चाहिँ त्यतिकै एन्डमा खान्छु भन्न मिल्दैन. So you can neglect those things. होइन it's not about making एकदम सानो सानो. You don't have to be so critical about everything. I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay, good.
Afterwards, evidence is, it's not amazing, but getting a little walk after, I think is a very good thing. Right after you eat. I wouldn't suggest अब गएर एकदम marathon नै कुदौँ भन्ने चाहिँ छैन होइन तर after you eat dinner, after about 10-15 minutes later, if you go on a half-mile walk just around the neighborhood, your blood is flowing, your muscles are activated होइन अनि muscle activate गर्यो भने चाहिँ muscleमा एउटा receptor हुन्छ होइन त्यो receptorले चाहिँ it helps bring the sugar into your cells again, so it makes that easier. So त्यो जुन spike हुन्छ फेरि you kind of help control that a little bit. So I think that's kind of a general, if you were just to make small changes, होइन you just change the order of the way you eat and get a little walk in after.
बियर चाहिँ कतिखेर खाने त
Beer comes in, I think, to a place where like you सबै sweeping changes गर्न थाल्यो भने if you take out beer, where's the soul?
Yeah.
Then that makes you really depressed. This is
Exactly.
Then you start eating, sweets every day. So
अब चाहिँ हामी कमन डिजिजेसको बारेमा कुरा गरौँ न त होइन हाम्रो यो अब अनहेल्दी लाइफस्टाइल हामीले वर्कआउटहरू गरेन खाएको खाएकै छ बसेको बसेको काउस पोटेटो भयो भने what are the chronic diseases that's around?
Yeah. हाम्रो community-मा, I would say probably the biggest is diabetes. Diabetes or high blood pressure. One of the two is probably the most common. सबैजनालाई हुने भने नेपाली community-मा high blood pressure र diabetes होला. Thyroid issues are also pretty common. And just, I think probably 70-80% of Nepali people have insulin resistance, which is also a disease essentially. Disease त भन्न मिल्दैन तर it's
which
a chronic,
leads to diabetes.
which yes, insulin resistance leads to diabetes. I know, and generally insulin resistance भने चाहिँ हामीले diagnose गर्ने कुरा होइन. Most of the time it goes unnoticed until regular checkup-मा गयो and they check your A1C and you realize, oh wow, it's now 5.8, you're pre-diabetic. Usually मान्छेहरूको first introduction, I guess, to diabetes will be like A1C check, got a regular checkup, and it gets a little high, and then you're like, okay, pre-diabetes भयो होइन. And what is pre-diabetes? Pre-diabetes is just your insulin has become resistant. Insulin resistance is high enough that your body is starting to accumulate sugar. भनेको अब जिउमा sugar आफ्नो bloodमा जुन हुन्छ त्यो sugarको level अलिकति high भयो होइन. Fasting levels of sugar are too high in your blood. त्यहीबाट diabetes gets worse and worse होइन. Your insulin resistance gets worse and worse. bloodमा more and more sugar accumulate हुँदै जान्छ and your sugar goes up and up and up. Pancreas has to work harder and harder to release more insulin. किनभने जति insulin resistant भयो pancreasले झन् धेरै insulin दिनु पर्यो होइन. अब at 25 years old, maybe 10 units of insulin was enough to process एक कप भातलाई process गर्न, let's say just for example, 10 युनिट इन्सुलिनले 1 कप राइस प्रोसेस गरेर हैन you get to a point where they 1 cup rice process गर्नको लागि your body may need to release 30 units of insulin हैन so pancreasले त्यो त्यति insulin बनाउँदा it gets tired, it gets burnt out, the cells start dying हैन and त्यसपछि you get to a stage where your body can't even make enough insulin किनभने pancreas त्यो burnt out भइसक्यो के and that's when you get to the stage in diabetes when you insulin लिन थाल्नुपर्छ हैन so first step of a diabetes भएपछि मान्छेलाई first औषधि भने धेरै जनाले खाने भने metformin हो हैन I'm sure many people are familiar with metformin. Metformin ले चाहिँ के गर्छ भने one of the biggest things it does is insulin sensitivity लाई increase गर्छ हैन insulin resistance को ठ्याक्क opposite कुरा भने insulin sensitivity. So त्यो जुन rusty चाबी हुन्छ insulin को that opens up the gates for the sugar to go जिउ भित्र or cells भित्र metformin ले चाहिँ त्यसलाई help गर्छ. So sugar level हरूलाई कम गर्नलाई metformin ले help गर्छ. When you do that अब metformin मा actually अलिकति weight loss पनि हुन्छ हैन weight loss को benefit पनि हुन्छ but that's one of the first things you do is to try to raise your insulin sensitivity and get your sugars under control. अर्को chronic disease भने अब high blood pressure हैन त्यो त genetically नै हामी predisposed छौं हैन there's not much you can do. Modifiable risk factor र unmodifiable risk factor हुन्छ हैन modifiable भने आफूले कन्ट्रोल गर्न सक्ने कुरा unmodifiable त अब कन्ट्रोल गर्न मिल्दैन हैन फ्यामिली हिस्ट्री एकदमै स्ट्रङ छ हाई ब्लड प्रेसरको भने chances are you're probably gonna get it तर आफूले कन्ट्रोल गर्न सक्ने कुरा भने अब स्मोकिङ हैन your diet controlling salt intake controlling कति एक्सरसाइज गरिन्छ and controlling your weight हैन weight is actually a really big thing in high blood pressure किनभने जति बढी weight भयो त्यति बढी high blood pressure हुँदै जान्छ हैन so I think those are the two key things हाम्रो community मा like if we really work on that then a lot of other things will kind of go away and a lot of things will be easier
so हाम्रो अब यो current dietary practice छ नि त हैन अब त्यसले इभेन्चुअली त्यसले नि लिड गरेको नि त यो chronic disease मा अनि हुन त हामीले अघिदेखि कुरा गरिराख्यौँ है डायटरी प्र्याक्टिसेस कसरी चेन्ज गर्ने भनेर तर के हाम्रो कमन प्र्याक्टिस जुन छ नि अहिले हामीले गरिरहेको मेन कल्प्रिट चाहिँ के हो त लाइक केले गर्दा चाहिँ यो क्रोनिक डिजिजेसहरूतिर गएको
मेन कल्प्रिट त चिनी हो
चिनी नै हो है
चिनी हो चिनी भनेपछि फेरि त्यो गुलियो चिनी मात्रै हैन जस्ट कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स हैन इज द कल्प्रिट I would say right next to that is your ultra processed food हरु जुन छ हाम्रो community मा हैन हामी जहिले पनि भन्छौं अमेरिकाको खाने like अमेरिकामा छ everything is so much better here I know the food is so much better here it's really not
yeah
it's really not a lot of the stuff we're eating even in the last 10 years ma has gotten so much worse these food companies spend billions of dollars in research every year to figure out how do we make things as profitable as possible हैन अब सबै जुन त्यो middle of the grocery store को aisleमा भएको कुराहरुमा सब wheatहरु भयो every carbohydrate that comes from nature they take it into a factory and they process out all of the fiber हैन so empty carbohydrate हुन्छ हैन so essentially everything all the carbohydrates you're eating processed food मा simple sugar हो हैन त्यो blood sugar को spike मज्जाले गर्छ so I think cutting out carbohydrates is the biggest key cutting out pani haina because again that's a drastic change haina slowing it down and being aware is the first step like kei drastic change chai nagarum bhanchu ma just for a week or two why don't we just look at la यसमा कति carbohydrate रहेछ नि त हैन कति भात खाइन्छ हैन like whatever plate of rice you get every night look at it calculate कति gram rice रहेछ and just look up how many grams of carbohydrates is in that rice and then we try to slowly cut back right now portion size I think that's a good way to do it rather than a sweeping change that never works
yeah so you talked about grocery store ko outside ma bhako stuff say like more healthier don't go to the middle aisle bhaneko can you explain a little more about that like with some examples
so aba say for example yahako aba hami here streeter ma chirem haina chirne bittikai sabai produce haru huncha tya haina you go to the right bakery त्यही हुन्छ and sabai produce huncha so that's all healthy stuff haina त्यो produce aisle ma bhako you can eat all of that it's on the outside of the store then the produce section बाट यता गयो then all the meats are there हैन outside edge मा meatहरु हुन्छ meat पछि त्यहाँ हुन्छ dairy yogurt all of that then you keep going you get to your eggs you get to your cream cheese you get to your cheese सबै कुरा is if you notice it flows on the outside of the store until middle of the store is designed for you to walk back and forth हैन actually crazy कुरा चाहिँ के छ भने त्यो aisles पनि grocery store मा हुन्छ नि माथिदेखि तल हेर्यो भने त्यो फुड कम्पनीहरुले कुन aisle मा खानेकुरा राखेको छ त्यसको based on where in the aisle the food is they have to pay a certain amount of money
top shelf versus bottom shelf
versus bottom shelf and sometimes the bottom shelf is costs more because kids go eye level ma so that's how much engineering goes into food I know so Coca-Cola le gaera they pay you know like Harris Teeter millions of dollars barsako to have that certain positioning but if you look at Kroger ko brand ko खानेकुरा हेर्यो भने they're not going to have that prime eye level placement I know if you look from the perspective of a child उनीहरुको eye level मा you find all the really interesting colorful stuff that they're going to want to eat so almost सबै social engineering नै हो के so everything is put in a place where you think oh you try गरौँ हैन eye level मा त्यो सबभन्दा that's the expensive stuff that's the people who are paying a lot of money to market to you middle aisles generally that's not to say middle ma केही पनि healthy कुरा छैन but generally more like धेरै ingredients भएको कुरा more processed stuff stays in the aisle हैन so that's why generally speaking beats middle aisles ma is more processed food so that's why I say shop on the periphery and then go to the inside just to pick up specific things not to just एउटा aisle यसरी एउटा अर्को aisle यसरी you don't need to do that right you just go get the things you need middle aisle मा हुँदाखेरि just be more aware of यो खानेकुरामा के ingredients छ त हैन what kind of stuff is in here there's a lot of ways these food companies sneak sugar into the food हैन sugar specifically sugar नै छैन भए पनि high fructose corn syrup हालिदिन्छ हैन that's still sugar essentially the carbohydrate हो हैन so just nutrition label चाहिँ पढ्नै पर्छ first for the sugar second for costo ingredients that could be a whole different podcast on reading how nutrition label costo ingredient like you have to watch out for costo ingredient you don't really need to pay attention to एउटा अर्को कुरा के हुन्छ भने ingredient list हेरेर sometimes people will say oh if you can't pronounce it don't eat it but that's not always a good thing either किनभने a lot of those things are healthy I mean those are fine preservatives हरु खानेकुरामा त राख्नै पर्यो so a lot of those things are fine तर just generally speaking trying to cut out ultra processed कुराहरु खानेकुरामा
so when we are reading the label so first thing is to look out carbs sugar trans fat
yes trans fat usually foods don't have trans fats anymore we figured out how bad those are and most foods don't have trans fat for myself and my family when I go look at an ingredients label the first thing my eye goes to is the total carbohydrates if you're only going to look at one thing I would look at the total carbohydrates and the dietary fiber त्यसमा पनि एउटा caveat के छ भने this is another trick they play on you हैन total carbohydrate कम होला तर you have to look at per serving
exactly that's what I was going to
that's what tricks you अब Oreo को हजुरले गरे हेर्छौ हैन you're like oh this is actually not bad the Oreo you know it might I don't know exactly कति छ तर when you look at it you're like oh this is let's say only 20 grams of carbohydrates serving size हेर्यो
one cookie
one cookie or two cookie so that's the other thing you look at is पहिले हेर्ने कति कार्बोहाइड्रेट छ then you look at how big is the serving because most of these servings realistic हुँदैन हैन when do you ever eat one Oreo or exactly. one Chips Ahoy cookie those are the big keys अनि त्यसपछि अब ingredients list that's a huge topic but really the way ingredients list works is ingredients list गर्दाखेरि the first thing on the ingredients list is by weight सबभन्दा बढी concentration जे छ त्यो they listed by weight के so ingredient list मा भएको first कुरा त्यो खानेकुरामा सबभन्दा बढी भएको चाहिँ त्यो हो अनि त्यसपछि last is the least in the food हैन so let's say अब you go and pick up Oreos and the first ingredient is sugar that means by weight 60% त्यसमा sugar होला अनि त्यसपछि it's in descending order हैन so that's another way to look at like के छ यो exact यो खानेकुरामा exactly भनेर
न्युट्रिसन फ्याक्ट्सको कुरा गर्दाखेरि अब त्यो लेबल त हामीले देख्छौँ हरेक प्रोडक्टमा देख्छौँ होइन तर हाउ टु रिड एन्ड अन्डरस्ट्यान्ड द्याट लेबल क्या क्यान वी डिस्कस अबाउट द्याट
Yeah, let's do it. So let's go through this label. You know? So this is for simple white bread. Wonder bread, white bread. Wonder bread the novel. Copyright. So this is a simple nutrition label for white bread. So serving size is 2 slices. You know? So you can be aware of that. So first thing, like I said, is the total carbohydrates. 29 grams carbohydrates. So, you know? Dietary fiber 3 grams so you can subtract that so 29 but 26 bio. So essentially 2 slices of bread 26 grams carbohydrates so, which is not bad. I know if you're eating bread with something that's not bad. Ingredients list first ingredient unbleached enriched flour so, I know त्यसमा भयो wheat flour, malted barley flour, niacin भने एउटा vitamin, iron अनि couple of other things हैन. Second ingredient भने water. So सबभन्दा बढी छ flour, त्यसपछि water, त्यसपछि sugar, त्यसपछि yeast हैन. अनि त्यसपछि 2% or less of the rest of these things. अब यसमा you don't have to look up every little thing अब के हो भनेर but there are certain apps अब हजुरले यो nutrition facts लाई scan गरे भने there are certain apps one I like to use is called YUKA YUKA अनि त्यो एपले चाहिँ के harmful ingredient छ भए चाहिँ they will label that and they will say एउटा score दिन्छ हैन so red मा छ भए चाहिँ you probably shouldn't eat that ingredient usually धेरै कुरा ingredient हरु यहाँ US मा चाहिँ it's banned in other countries because it might be known to cause harm हैन so you can look at that but with this I would say probably not horrible हैन you're getting 26 grams of carbohydrates for 2 slices generally I would look for a bread with more fiber because like I said हाम्रो डायटमा फाइबर पुग्दैन हैन one of the big goals for everyone should be दिनको 30 grams fiber. I think that's something that everyone pretty much has to do,
which is equivalent to like के चाहिँ हुन्छ त
leafy greens I know nuts lentils मा actually हुन्छ fiber vegetables have a lot of fiber like broccoli just really whole food I know like I said त्यो बाहिर grocery store को बाहिरको जुन भने produce section मा भएको सबै कुरा has usually a lot of fiber so we should be focusing on that सकेसम्म body fiber ल्याउनु पर्यो because that really helps with
and does it matter like how you eat it raw खाने कि or हामी तरकारी पकाउँछौँ भन्नु न नेपाली हाउसहोल्ड मा तरकारी पकाएर खायो भने त्यो फाइबर लस त हुँदैन नि
No, as far as I know from what I've read हुँदैन loss so हजुरले broccoli पकाएर खायो भने it's not going to be less certain खानेकुराहरुमा चाहिँ actually झन् body activate पनि हुन्छ so
nice.
it's not that's not something I think anyone needs to worry about okay if you're making a change and you're eating more vegetables you don't need to focus on what's the difference between raw and cooked no you're eating more vegetables so it will be helpful
okay
I know so yeah I think just Google it I know look up highest fiber content foods and make it a goal to eat a couple of those things every day 30 grams fiber daily खायो र enough protein खायो भने you will notice a difference in your health
cool so when you're looking at the nutrition facts and ingredient list हेर्दाखेरि so we already talk about carbs and sugars but what is the other thing that we need to avoid basically app called YUKA right
yeah
that's a good idea
I really like that app I think everyone should get it simply because you don't have to do this for the rest of your life where every single kind of grocery store मा सब कुरा स्क्यान गर्दै हिँड्नु पर्दैन but generally speaking हैन हाम्रो grocery store मा जुन गएर हजुरले shopping गर्छिन्छ that doesn't necessarily change हैन you have your certain things that you go to and your certain things you always buy so एकचोटी जाँदाखेरि just scan everything you buy and if you notice like oh यो कुरामा this thing has a score of 3 and it's red and it's horrible for me YUKA मा actually alternate पनि देखाउँछ, like what this is the food you're trying to get, but maybe get this brand because this doesn't have as many harmful ingredients. So एउटा कुरा you could swap that food, होइन? So generally you're eating something healthier there. So you do it for a week or two, and then you realize, okay, yo खानेकुरा चाहिँ is not healthy for me, and I'll make these switches. And so you make the switches. So I think something like that is really helpful. अरू कुरा अब हेर्ने भने look at protein as well, होइन? That's another thing हाम्रो डायटमा is lacking, extremely lacking is protein.
Especially for vegetarians?
Especially for vegetarians, but really all Nepali people. I think we really neglect the protein. Protein is very important किनभने once you hit 30, your body starts deteriorating, right? That's the peak of your life, pinnacle of everything. So muscle loss सुरु हुन्छ 30 years old पछि. So if you don't keep that up with exercise and getting enough protein, muscleहरू functionally decline हुँदै जान्छ. So making sure to get an adequate amount of protein daily, होइन? But what is adequate amount of protein? Generally, I would say per kilogram, 0.8 to 0.1 grams of protein per kilogram. So if you weigh pounds inside, if you weigh 180 pounds, let's just divide that in half, 90 kilograms. 90 kilograms, you try to get 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram. But if you see 0.8, 72 to 90 grams of protein is your protein goal.
Every day.
Yeah. So just take your weight in kilograms and do 0.8 is your lower limit. So absolute minimum is 0.8 times your body weight in kilograms. So if you weigh 100 kilos, you need at least 80 grams of protein. That's a non-negotiable, right? You have to have 80 grams of protein and 30 grams of fiber. And that alone will be a huge, huge change in your health. You will notice it. A month of eating an adequate amount of protein and fiber and cutting down sugars, you will notice a drastic difference of it, just in the way you feel, in the way your skin looks, in the way you move around. I encourage everyone to try it.
Dr. Ronin, how bad is MSG? अनि high fructose corn syrup देखेपछि चाहिँ do we need to be scared?
Saturday मात्रै म जान्छु 2 घण्टा सकर खेल्छु तर अरू दिन चाहिँ म दिनभरि बसेर काम गर्छु and then काम सिधेपछि काउचमा बसेर मुभी हेर्छु and I don't move at all. That's really harmful for your body.
उठबस त हामी सानैदेखि गर्ने हो क्या अब स्कुलमा नै उठबस गर्नु पर्थ्यो होइन असाइनमेन्ट गरेन भने त उठबस हो नि त कान समातेर होइन
कहाँ म नेपालमा बोर्न भयो भने कति उठबस गर्यो
मोमो एन्ड कोक इज फाइन
मोमो एन्ड कोक मोमो एन्ड कोक यु निड मोमो एन्ड कोक
यो अर्को क्वेसन चाहिँ होइन यो चाहिँ सबैमा लागु हुन्छ होला क्या यो चाहिँ हरेक हाउस होल्डमा होइन Is there an explanation for why every Nepali auntie is a certified health expert without a degree?